If you need to get lesson 10, I encourage you to get an outline. After question number 5, I didn't make another slide. There don't any more maps to give, so we'll just take it from the outline. But I did have, from last week, I guess I didn't have that up there. Norris has done that for me tonight, so I appreciate that. But in these first few questions, you'll be able to look at it on the board, but then how far we get, I don't know. I want us to put in perspective, what's the difference between what we've been seeing in Deuteronomy 32, that this was a song, and now we're observing that we're getting into verse 30, chapter 33 and verse 1, it said this is a blessing. Is there a distinction between those two? This is not a question I asked, but it's an introductory point. And it puts these 2 points together as he has a song and a blessing. Well, they're about the same. Are they the same? We know what a blessing is, don't we? Did you review back what a song was? It was an indictment. It was an indictment. Remember leading up to that song in Deuteronomy 31 and verse 19, therefore write ye this song for you, and teach thou it to the children of Israel. Put it in their mouths, that this song may be a witness for me against the children of Israel. Be a witness of me against them. That's kind of what the law would be. Verse 26, take the book of the law and put it by the side of the ark of the covenant. Put it inside that ark in its insides, and Jehovah your God, that it may there be a witness against thee. It's kind of like it was synonymous with the what? The song was synonymous with what? What do they share? It's a witness against you, not a blessing for you. When we think of a psalm, we think, well, that's just a wonderful blessing, rejoicing. Haven't we seen that there's the blessing and the curse and the blessing? Mount Ebal, Mount Gerizim, that's going to be happening when these people get into the land, and after they take the land for a while, they'll go up to that point and they will set forth the cursing, that their relationship with the law, and the blessing. Well, this song was written, and you notice through that song, it speaks about what's going to happen when you reject me. That's what God is saying. Verse 6, do ye thus requite Jehovah, O foolish people and unwise? Is not he thy father that bought thee? Aren't you embarrassed about what this is how you requite me? And he speaks about the judgments that would come. And verse 42, I will make mine arrows drunk with blood, and my sword shall devour flesh, the blood of the slain and the captives, from the head of the leaders of the enemy. And then he comes back after he's dealt with his people. He lets them know, rejoice, O you nations, with his people, for he will avenge the blood of his servants. He's going to bring the sword to his servants because they rejected him, but then he's going to render vengeance to those who dealt with the servants, because God is not in a political party. God is not with one nation over another. God is holy, and if you want to be a nation of God's people, you be holy, and Israel wasn't. And he reminds them that in the song. And what's interesting to me, you teach that song to the children, and whether it's not saying 4-part harmony. It's very poetic, and maybe there could be the remembrance of that song. They could maybe have a rhythm to it. They could remember the words that are associated with one another. But it is an indictment against God's people when they go against God's law. That's the song. But as we'll get into lesson 10, it is a blessing. He didn't say that with a song. He said, this is a blessing. And he speaks of the tribes of Israel and the specific blessings that will be connected with them. And that's what we see in this particular chapter. And then we'll finish up with the brief chapter of 34 of what happened in connection with Moses' last days and his death. So this song, this blessing, could have been something that was put together by those who finished up the book of Deuteronomy. Indeed, Moses wrote them. Indeed, they were inspired of God. And men were directed to bring forth the closing history of Moses, but he may have already finished when he wrote that song and he gives this blessing, and now it's recorded for us that we're looking at. But I want us to see that distinction. We think he just put them together. He had a song, blessing, and then he had a blessing under the specific tribes. They're very distinct, and it just fits with blessing and cursing, cursing and blessing. And those are the two sides, as far as God's concerned, of our association with Him through His law. Either going to be blessed by it, or we're going to be cursed by it, because it will be a witness. Who changes when we do not comply with God's law? Who changes? Oh, I'll change my law for you. No. We're broken under that law. My servants will be put to death. And that's what happened with the people. And he's just predicting that it would happen. He said, I've already seen it in my life when you rebelled against God through me. So it's not a big deal to him that these people will do that as well when he's gone. But it's sad. And it just tells you how much we need to teach our children and to be keeping the Word of God upon their mind as well. All right, let's enter into question number 1. Describe how Moses exalts God's glory. It kind of begins with God's glory, and how does he introduce this blessing? He's exalting God, but how does he introduce this blessing? All right.
It's like the sun, and it's like him coming from Sinai, dawn. It's a comparison to sunrise.
Well, that very well. I didn't see the poetry in that. So that's true. I know he mentions all these mountains. I know he came from Mount Sinai, and he shone from the Mount Piran, and some of these may be to the northeast. That would be sunrise from that mountain. But he's coming, we know he came from Mount Sinai and dealing with what and providing what? The law. Isn't it interesting? God came from heaven first, and that's the glory that we have. God is eternal. He's always been, and then he made himself known. That's how he begins to exalt God. And was it a glorious thing? We talk about the sun rising and idea of imagery of light coming to the people. They should uphold that light. But was it kind of a glorious coming of the law from Mount Sinai? Or was it, here comes the law? Where was it? Mount Sinai. Exodus 19. Was there smoke on that mountain? Now, if he started putting smoke around this, there's a cloud on Mount Sinai, and all of a sudden you heard a trumpet. No, you didn't hear a trumpet. You didn't hear a loud trumpet. You heard a very loud trumpet, summoning the people to come to the mountain. And question number 2 here, why is the law described as fiery? Because in verses 17 and 18 of Exodus 19, there was fire burning in that mountain. It's a fiery law. Because of the glory of God, he's introducing himself that way. Transfiguration of Jesus. When God is going to say, this is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. He did that as baptism. But in the transfiguration, where Jesus is shining gloriously, brighter than the sun, but gloriously, what's the point? I'm going to bring forth that glory so you will hear ye him. Elijah didn't shine like this. Prophets, Moses didn't shine like this. But there is that transfiguration that indeed he's the one that is indeed of God, and you need to hear him. He is my beloved Son. And all of the glory, the brightness connected with God's glory, because we can't look upon God and live. The point is that we can't look upon him because he's an unapproachable light, the Bible says. And so there's that glory connected with God. And his glorious entrance was not creation. Glorious entrance was with the people giving what? The law that they should obey, that they need to submit to. And when they do, there indeed will be that blessing. So he came from Sinai, but it's as if he rose from Mount Seir unto them. He shone forth from Mount Paran. And he came from the 10,000 of holy ones. Who might that be? Angelic beings. Stephen will say that the law was ordained of angels, connected with being appointed. This is what's accompanying the loud trumpet. With these 10,000s of his holy ones, at his right hand was a fiery law. It was fire law for them. Does he love the people? He says, yea, and the saints are in thy hand. They sit down at the feet. Everyone shall receive my words. As if the people are now attentive and they're ready to listen to the law. And when that happens, there's blessing. That's how he introduces a blessing. Law. And people that he loved, he's giving that. Did he give that law to the Gentiles? Paul argued that why are the Jews, why are they set apart? Are they blessed? Yeah, first of all, they got a law that nobody else got. It separated them from the nations about them, their dietary laws, their idea that they will not have any image before them. That's so much emphasized in the law of Moses. And that became a very important distinction. I want a holy people, and they're going to be a holy priesthood. And you and I come along and look at that and say, I tell you, I'd straighten up if a very loud trumpet and a fire came around and here's the smoke filling up this auditorium. I'm going to listen to God. Well, I hope we listen to God when we got His Word before us, because that's what makes it glorious. The law, what He's written for us to follow, is what's in store for us. So I think the glory that was connected with the coming of the law, and here's the mountain they came from. It looks like He came from all the other, and I very well could look at that as the coming of the rising of the sun. The glorious sun could be set forth there. But I think what made it fiery law was when we read in Exodus 19 that mountain was on fire as well. All right, there's the glory. Now he begins to unfold blessings to the 12 tribes of Israel. But he doesn't do it the way that you'd probably like it. Because there's one tribe not mentioned. What is it? Who is that tribe? David? Simeon. And since you answered that, why? What did he do?
It said he slew a man, for one thing, and it even goes on to say that he hamstrung an ox.
Well, that may be what got him. I don't know, but Levi's going to be praised here for killing his own people. Levi will kill their own people, and they're praised for that in this psalm, in this blessing. But hamstring an ox, maybe so. But wonder if there's no punishment in that. Remember, Moses is dealing with the people, and what has been emphasized by him is the land promise. It's the land you're going to. And that land was divided among the tribes of Israel. We don't have anybody mentioned here called Manasseh and Ephraim. But who is mentioned? Joseph. So Gad's going to be mentioned, and they're going to be the east side of the Jordan River. But when we look at the land promise, and what David has said is possible. I mean, I appreciate him answering why, because sometimes we wouldn't know why. But you remember, let's go to the dividing of the land. In Joshua, the 19th chapter, we see the land that is being set forth by Lot. God has set forth, set forth the lots of how they're going to divide the land. I won't read all of this, but verse 1 said, the second lot came out for Simeon. Even for the tribe of the children of Simeon, according to their families, and their inheritance, was in the midst of the inheritance of the children of what? What tribe? Judah. So when the land was divided, Simeon could have been connected with Judah. And we see in verse 9, out of the part of the children of Judah was the inheritance of the children of Simeon. For the portion of the children of Judah was too much for them. Therefore the children of Simeon had inheritance in the midst of their inheritance. So it may not be this idea of cursing, because see, this was a blessing. Who is mentioned that was under a curse when Israel talked about the blessings to his children? Reuben. Is Reuben mentioned here in the blessing? How dare God do that? Reuben, he said, let him live. Population growth. So we've got to look at a context and realize, well, how come Reuben is being blessed? And we'll talk about him in a moment. But he's mentioned Simeon or not. Was Simeon more evil because he did an ox? He took lives of a man, so did Levi, and they're blessed. Had to be a context. I think this would be a legitimate place to be thinking, because he's going to mention two tribes right together in verses 18 and 19. Two tribes just mentioned right together. They're not even divided. In fact, I have a coherent whole about them. But Simeon's not mentioned. And just like Joseph is mentioned, so we know Manasseh and Ephraim wouldn't be there, but they're going to be talked about as being part of that. But Judah's possession, because of her number, was not, it was too great. And so Simeon got to inherit what is with Judah. And indeed, they would be very much blessed together in that land. So that's my suggestion, thought. And anybody have a third or fourth one? Yes, sir?
Well, Jacob's blessing in Genesis 49, into verse 7, he says, I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. So they were to be scattered, even Jacob said that.
Yeah.
Of course, they were not totally annihilated, because they're mentioned in First Chronicles 4 and 42.
Of course, the sin of the scepter, we're not going to depart from Judah, so they weren't going to be annihilated, because who came from Judah? Jesus. So it wasn't going to happen for being totally annihilated. But Simeon was in connection with that, so there would be a part of a blessing of Judah. And our point is that we're emphasizing coming into the land promise. And that even has a place when we're thinking about, well, the promise to Abraham and all the nations of the earth will be blessed. Yes, that's going to happen with Israel, coming of Jesus, but there was a particular point in Deuteronomy about the promise fulfilled in the land, because here was a new generation. The older generation is not going to get to that land. Who's not going to be able to go on the land? Moses, their leader. A lot of emphasis upon that. And so when we look at Deuteronomy, I think that'd be a healthy place to begin. So you can eliminate all of them. And I don't know if David did that. I did. I didn't remember who was there, and I go through them. And verses 18 and 19, to just bring together two that are of there, and we'll come back to it a little bit later. But notice in Zebulun he said, rejoice, Zebulun, in thy going out, and Issachar in thy tents. So I'm going out to work, I'm coming in to live. He's talking about their daily work, going out, and then as they come back, they're back home. He put those two tribes together as if they're sharing in that. But he puts the things together. So it's not like, I'm going to give you the 12 tribes of Israel, I'm going to bless each one. And yet he blesses Reuben when earlier, we'll talk about him in just a moment. So did Moses well, let's talk about him now. Question number 4. Did Moses contradict what Jacob pronounced upon Reuben in Genesis 49 in verse 4? And we ask you to explain your answer. Verse 6 says, let Reuben live and not die, nor let his men be few. Kind of a short thing I've given him, but let him live and not die. Why do you think that's emphasized? But it has something to do with Genesis 49 verse 4 and the life that Reuben lived. What did Reuben do? Yeah. And so he was the eldest. So how was he punished? How was he discredited and not going to be blessed? He's not going to be blessed as the firstborn, even though he was. But let him live here. He may deserve to die, what he did, is some people, but let not his men be few. So don't let him be completely annihilated. But there's a remnant there coming from Reuben, even though he did not receive the blessing of the firstborn. But he is mentioned here in the blessing, which says a lot about God. And of course, he's inspired this blessing that Moses is presenting to them. Any comments on that? You might have another angle that gets to the same place. Question number 5. How is Moses' prophetic blessing in line with all of what the Old Testament says concerning the future of Judah? Anybody kind of sum that up?
With his hands he contended for them. That almost exactly sounds like David's fights against the Philistines and all, that Judah would contend for the people of Israel.
And that's a difficult passage to. Is he talking about Judah's hands, or is he talking about? Well, in my Bible it said, with his hands he contended for himself. Let his hands be perfected for them, as if God is going to be behind this. When God was behind David succeeding, and it doesn't eliminate God, but some have said, well, it's talking about what his hands contended for him. The Bible is for himself, but it may be for him. And the idea, let God contend for him and bless him. But either way, if we just say hands contended for himself, there's a sense of the leadership of Judah. When hear Jehovah the voice of Judah and bring him unto his people, and contending for them, he would be a leader. Judgment would be there for a scepter of righteousness, and the idea of being a standard. And see, they were always the first to come into and travel. See, again, coming to the land of promise. They led the 12 tribes. They were leaders. And if they had to contend with an enemy and so forth, let him contend with himself. He's coming for the people. He's coming to the people. He will lead them. He was the one the first to go out. Again, looking at how they occupied the land, I think helps us understand these particular passages, though what's been said, it doesn't contradict that at all. But there's a sense of contending for himself, in the sense that here he was put in a place of leadership. and for his people. And he would do that with a scepter of righteousness and judgment and so forth from the other blessing that Jacob had given him. So to me, I think there's the idea of that leading the people into the land of Canaan, being that place on the forefront of the people, to the people, being a forefront and a leader to them, may be also that's emphasized here. All right, question 6. We go dark now, as far as the overhead is concerned. With whom are the two men in Urim? And I probably should have illustrated that with a slide, but I didn't. What in the world is that? And is that term singular or plural? Both of them are plural. Thummim and Urim, they're plural. But they may have been two singular rocks, stones. And why, with whom are these being set forth as a blessing that is taking place there? Why would that be a blessing, and a blessing to whom? What tribe is he pointing to? Levi. What were the Levites tribes about? Priests and Levites, who were helpers of priests. But priest would be the sons of what son of Levi? Would be Aaron. And we see that Aaron was entrusted with that as the high priest. Exodus 28 and verse 30, I think it would be a place we could look at that. when that's being mentioned, I think we can then look at the definition of those things in their context. Verse 29 says, Aaron shall bear the names of the children of Israel in the breastplate of judgment upon his heart, when he goeth into the holy place for a memorial before Jehovah continually. So he would be there having the 12 tribes of Israel and their stones. And thou shalt put in the breastplate of judgment the Urim and Thummim, or Thummim and Urim. He would put that in the breastplate, and they shall be upon Aaron's heart when he goeth in before Jehovah, and Aaron shall bear the judgment of the children of Israel upon his heart before Jehovah continually. So there is, in the presence of God, I'm representing the 12 tribes of Israel. I am high priest. I'm going before the presence of God. That's kind of what a high priest does. On behalf of whom? His people. But in that breastplate were, some have said, two stones. And how would they be the perfections and lights? Two different things. Connected with high priesthood, connected with the Levites. How would you, if you just had that, how would you figure that out? And then you go all through the Bible and find it, and it's always, it'll make it clear. But from that standpoint, you're standing before God with the people, representing them. But on this occasion, what are you getting from God? Let's start there. I'm coming in, and I've got the Thummim. What are they going to be for the people? How would they be perfections, plural? How would they be lights, plural? God's revelation for his people. It didn't say just light. All of the revelation that God would give, God would be giving them wisdom to follow. God would be giving them on certain occasions when, should we go to battle or not? Let's take the Urim and Thummim and see what God has to say, priest. Yeah, go, don't go. They were the complete, whole, we talk about mature, not necessarily they're sinless, they are, but the complete counsel of God when they needed guidance. And therefore, if you got a perfect answer, and that becomes light. And it wasn't just single light and single perfections, it was plural. Because that's how they went before God to get guidance from God. They would then refer to that as being, here's what came from the presence of God. This is the route that we should follow. And who would have that? The men who are entrusted to be teaching them what? Thank you. Be teaching them what? The law. And how they should be guided in certain situations. And so I think the Levites, that's a perfect place for that to be. How would Benjamin be blessed? Question number 7. Would he be protected? Verse 12, O Benjamin, he said, the beloved of Jehovah shall dwell in safety by him. He covereth him all the day long, and he dwelleth between his shoulders. How does he describe Benjamin? Was he the youngest of Jacob? You know what you think about your youngest. They're the beloved. You love them. They're special. And here Benjamin was one that was special in his point about God, but even among his father. And they shall dwell in safety. They're always worried about the youngest one. And they would be dwelling in safety. And that's what we see taking place in that verse. Anything you want to add to that about Benjamin? Why does Joseph seem to be blessed more than the others? Because all of a sudden we see Joseph in verse 13 all the way down to verse 17. And if you divide up the blessing, in what areas of life is his tribe going to be blessed? Let's see if we can sum this up in the first. Blessed of Jehovah be his what? Land. Precious things from heaven for the dew, and for the deep that coucheth beneath. For the precious things of the fruits of the sun, and for the precious things of the growth of the moons, for the chief things of the ancient mountains, for precious things of everlasting hills. That sound like crops? Sound like productive farmland? Bringing forth the blessings, the sun is involved, and all of the moon, and all the different changes of seasons and changes of the day that we see that's taking place. The dew, all of that is for the crops that he's going to be blessed with. Verse 17, the firstling of his herd. Thank you. We go to crops, we go to flocks and herds that they have. And his horns are the horns of the wild ox. With them he shall push the people, all of them, to the ends of the earth. And so there's the blessings and then the power connected with that. And now does he mention in Joseph Ephraim and Manasseh? Does he do that in your Bible? And they are the 10,000s of Ephraim, and they are the thousands of Manasseh. They're the tribes of Joseph. Who was the firstborn? Who should get double? Who should be blessed more? So who would be the firstborn? It's Manasseh. And they're the 10,000s of Ephraim and they're thousands of Manasseh. It ain't working that way. But that's the way God worked it. And when you say thousands and 10,000s, was Ephraim a pretty large tribe? Populated of people, Ephraim? Why do you think the northern kingdom became Ephraim was Israel? They were the dominant tribe. And that's the only thing I can offer as a sense of while they were blessed more, it seems like. But he did recognize the distinction between, he made the decision who's going to be blessed more. And it wasn't the firstborn. That's the way it's going to work, just like Jacob and Esau. He's setting forth, he has his place on how these blessings are going to be given, and he makes a distinction, thousands and 10,000, I think, recognizing that. So I think it's because of the abundance of their population, and they will be blessed with their crops and their possessions and their herds and so forth. They will be blessed that way. All right? Question number 9. Why do you think Zebulun and Issachar are blessed together, and what is their twofold blessing? I kind of ran over that, but why are they put there together? Again, I think it completes a whole. Not that they weren't the same tribe and distinct in all ways, but he's putting them together as if they talk about their work, and maybe very similar, being people that looking after the flocks and that sort of thing, dwelling in tents, moving one place to other for land. But it gave both, what the distinction is that they're going out, so they would be out of their tents, going to work, going to do what they need to do, but they had a place of security to come back to, and going into to their tents. They should call the peoples under the mountains, and they shall offer sacrifices of righteousness. For they shall suck the abundance of the seas. Which tribe was near the Mediterranean Sea? Zebulun or Issachar? Zebulun was. Issachar is very near the Sea of Galilee. But there would be abundant treasures. They'll suck the abundance out of the seas, the hidden treasures of the sand, and then he speaks about Gad. So they would have prosperity, but Issachar wasn't that close to the sea of the Mediterranean Sea, but Zebulun was, and he's mentioned there first, and they're going out in their prosperity and their works and so forth. All right? Question 10. What two characteristics of God are brought out in Moses' blessing? And this is where I just kind of pause in the middle of this and what we're seeing unfold. And I just set forth the fact that he is indeed a provider, and he's a protector. There's a sense he'll be protecting Benjamin. I think he'll be involved in the hands of Jacob as he's leading him, protecting him, with upholding his hands. All through here, you begin to see he provides for your well-being. He's a protector. Those are two great blessings that are brought out about God throughout this. Now, back to Dan. Question number 11. How is Dan's vigor and force brought out in Moses' blessing? When we speak about Dan, verse 22. Then we'll stop. How does he describe him? He's a lion's whelp that leapeth forth from Bashan. And so there, he was in that northern area. Anything like a lion's whelp, that's pretty strong. And he'd be a strong force to deal with as well. That's the blessing that will be upon him. We'll stop there. I know our time is up, and we'll start with question number 12 and finish up lesson 10. I also have the first lesson following. We're going to take the minor prophets in chronological order. That will help us to be studying the time frame. We're going to go from the 9th century to the final when the people are coming back from the land of captivity. And so we're going to look at in the first one, and I've got the outline out there. You can pick it up. We'll have it up online. But you got a decision to make. Are you going to take an early date? Or are you going to take a late date? And I give you information to study. So if you'll pick that up very quickly, we'll get through lesson 10. And if we get into that lesson, that's what it'll be. So we'll be taking the minor prophets, but we take them in chronological order, not the way they are in your Bible. And I hope that we can put the thoughts together that way. Thank you.